Okay, so these are our guided notes for today, and we're going to go over some vocabulary and talk about what makes up an equation. So the first thing we're going to do is define coefficient. This red 3 right here, and that's why this is red, is a coefficient in this equation. And a coefficient is the number in front of the variable. And we'll talk about what a variable is in a minute, but it is also the number that the variable is being multiplied by. Okay, so the number in front of the variable, or the number that is multiplying the variable, is called a coefficient. This yellow X here is, let's see if I can find a darker yellow to write with. How about this sort of, all right, we'll go with that pukey green color. All right, so there we go. The yellow X is a variable, and a variable is a letter in an expression or equation that represents an unknown value. So in this case it's an X because we don't know what this number is until we solve the equation. So it represents an unknown value. All right, the constants in this equation are these green numbers. And constant means it doesn't change. It stays the same. It's always there. And these constants are just numbers. They're not going to change depending on what the value of the unknown is, a variable. So constants are numbers in an expression or equation that don't contain a variable. They don't change. They stay the same. They are constant. Okay, now terms, and I'm going to make this a little bit smaller because we're going to put some more information with this. I'm going to make it purple. Okay, terms. I put purple boxes around 3 different terms in this equation. A term is a separate value. I'm going to capitalize that. A separate value that is being added as part of an expression or equation. And then we have in this, well, we have different types of terms. And there's a reason I'm saying they're all being added even though this says -2. So let's talk about that for a second. Why did I put this minus with this 2? Well, I'll tell you why. I'm going to get out of line here and get a little thicker. Because, as we know, we learned in 7th grade, subtraction is just adding the opposite. So instead of saying -2, I could say plus -2. And that would make this all addition. So in between the terms here, we would have addition, and that makes this term negative. But instead of going to all that trouble, I just call it all addition, and I don't write that necessarily. I just know that. And any negative or any subtraction sign goes with the term that is right after it. So that's why this is -2 that's being added to the 3x. So I'm going to go back to my text box here. And we have 2 types of terms. We have variable terms. Oops. A variable term is a term that includes a variable. And in this case, our variable term is 3x. Then we also have constant terms, and a constant term is a term, that does not, I'm going to capitalize that, contain a variable. So I have two constant terms here in this equation. I have a -2 and I have a 7. So hopefully that makes sense to you, and we'll work with it some more in the next few weeks, and by then I guarantee that it will. Okay, an expression, and I've got gray here, but when I use the gray option here, you couldn't read it. So I'm going to type with black here. An expression is a collection of terms that does not, I'm going to put not, include an equal sign. Does not include an equal sign as an expression. So one side of this equation, all this stuff up to the equal sign, is an expression, 3x minus 2. And we could call this 7 an expression, but we normally don't if there's just a constant. We would just call that a constant instead of calling it a whole expression. If there was a variable here or more than one term, that would definitely be an expression. Okay? And equation. An equation is this whole thing, a collection of terms that does include an equal sign. Typically, equations have two sides, the left side, all the stuff on the left of the equal sign, and the right side, all the stuff on the right of the equal sign. And we're going to learn how we can change each expression on each side by doing opposite and inverse operations, and we're going to learn all kinds of fun things about solving equations. But the thing that you need to understand is the equation is the whole thing when it has an equal sign. The expression is just one side of it, or we could just have something that said 3x minus 2, and that would be an expression, or just 7, although I would just call that a constant. So here are some practice ones. Let's see if we can figure some stuff out together here. First thing I want to do is I want to make my coefficients red. So let's see. Here, a coefficient is a number in front of a variable. So here I've got a 5 in front of this variable. Oh, I'm going to have to go down here and get red. Yep, so I'm going to make that red. That 5 is a coefficient. It's the number in front of a variable. But look at this variable right here. It has a negative in front of it, but no number. And maybe some of you remember from 7th grade, and we're going to say that this negative goes with this x. But, so it's got to be the coefficient, but what number would go here that wouldn't change the value of negative x, or negative I also read sometimes as the opposite of x? Well, what we can multiply any number by and keep it the same, or change it to the opposite if we're using a negative, is -1. So when we have negative x minus x, the coefficient is actually -1. If I had plus x, the coefficient would just be 1. What's the coefficient here? Well, the coefficient for this variable term is 3, because that's the number in front of the x. Here we have an 8 in front of the x. That's the coefficient. And I don't have any more variable terms, so there you go. All my coefficients are red, just like up here. Down here, a variable is a letter in an expression or equation that represents an unknown value. Okay, the variable is the letter. So I'm going to use this pukey green color, and I'm going to change all my variables to that lovely pukey green color. There was an x. I don't have any more letters here. Here, this is an x, and this is an x, and this is an x. So, oops, I should still be in text box, shouldn't I? There we go. Turn. How come that's not working? Turn. There we go. There we go. Change. Okay, so there's all my variables turned sort of yellow. Maybe I should call that gold instead of pukey green. I like that better. Okay, Constants are the numbers that don't have a variable. They don't change. And I'm going in with green here. Here I have a constant. Is this constant 6? No, remember that negative has to go with whatever comes after it. So this constant is actually -6. Here I have a term that doesn't have a variable, so it's a constant. And that negative goes with that, so it's -17. Here, 7 is a constant. That's a number. It doesn't have a variable. That's a variable term. That's a variable term. That's a variable term. Oh, but here I have a constant term. And the negative goes with that 9. And here I have another constant term. I'm going to put that, well, I can just do the 2. So the constant here is the 2. Okay? So now I've made all my constants green. I've got terms. Now I'm going to put a purple box around every term here. Remember that any plus or minus has to go with whatever comes right after it, so that everything except the equal sign is part of a term. That's how I like to think about it anyway. Okay, so, oops, I don't want a line. Let me erase that. I want a box, and I want a purple box, and I don't want it to be that thick. There we go. Okay, so 5x is my variable term right there. That's one term. Then -6, that's another term. And -17, that's another term. Those two terms are constant terms. Then over here I have 7 is a term. -1x is a term. +3x is a term. 8x is a term. -9 is a term, and +2 is a term. There are all my terms. And now I'm going to go back and just with, oh, look at that, I don't have a black anymore. Black. I am going to label these terms as either variable or constant. And actually, I don't want to do that. This is what I want to do. I want to draw, I'm going to use black. I like to draw a wavy line because that's kind of variable. It goes up and down under my variable terms, and a straight line under my constant terms. So this is a variable term, this is a constant term, this is a constant term. Constant term, variable term. Yeah, that's kind of hard to do with a mouse. Variable term, constant term, and constant term. So straight lines are constant terms, wiggly lines are variable terms. Plus wiggly lines kind of look like a bunch of V's together if you can do it with a mouse without being silly. Okay, so there's our two different types of terms. Variable term, variable term, variable term, variable term, constant term, constant term, constant term, constant term, constant term. Okay, expression. We're going to put a gray circle, if we can, around, except I don't have gray, so I'm going to find a gray. Let's do a nice dark gray, how about? Okay, I'm going to put a gray circle around each expression here, the parts that don't have the equal sign. So all the stuff, oh, nope. I want a circle, and I want gray. Okay. Oh, so for now I need to erase all that junk. Go away, dot. It doesn't want to. Well, whatever. It's fine. We'll just leave it there. Okay, I got a gray circle. I'm going to put a gray circle around my 5x minus 6. That's an expression. I'm not going to around -17 because that's just a constant. But all this stuff, I have 3 terms on the left side of this equation. That's an expression. And over here I also have 3 terms. Also an expression. So 3 expressions in 2 equations here because I'm not going to call -17 an expression. Then equation. Oh, I made that black and not, oh my goodness. Sometimes I'm just not that bright. I want this to be blue. So I'm going to change it to blue because I didn't do that before. Okay. Equations, I'm going to do a box around the equations, and the box is going to be blue. So box, and blue. This whole thing with an equal sign is an equation, and this whole thing with an equal sign is an equation. And hopefully that helps you understand all of our vocabulary for this whole unit that we're going to be doing for at least the next 3 weeks. Thanks for listening.